Hey, it's Will.
And I'm Mike.
Welcome to First Watch, the show that's part review, part reaction. Today we have with us, well, this is a set, actually. We're going to be talking about Nemesis 2. We also have Nemesis 3 and Nemesis 4. So, if you're unfamiliar with Nemesis, the first Nemesis is like a low-budget cyberpunk gun-fu movie, obviously influenced by John Woo, obviously influenced by stuff like Blade Runner, and it also was a very clear influence to me on The Matrix and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that came out in 92, right?
92,
91,
yeah.
92. Nemesis 2 came out in 95. Nemesis 3 and 4 came out, I think, both in 96. And so Nemesis 1 had a Blu-ray release on the MVD Rewind collection on its own disc. It's its own thing. 2, 3, and 4 are one set here, which we have. It's a Blu-ray. It's the slipcase. You've got the poster, the whole thing that you usually get with the Rewind collection. And so the first thing that you need to know about these movies if you're going into them is that they are low budget, like to the extreme.
Oh, yeah.
Like to the point that we watched the making of on the Albert Pune is the director. Yeah. And they did. So he's a really interesting filmmaker because he makes really low budget movies that I think the average movie viewer. And again, I actually really liked Nemesis, like genuinely enjoyed it as a piece of entertainment. In addition to liked it like from the perspective of us like being aspiring filmmakers or whatever looking at it. These movies are like much lower budget than Nemesis, and they faced huge restrictions to the point that he actually gave himself rules for this movie. They used no lights at all, except for bounce boards, and they didn't do like extra takes and no moving camera at all.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was like individual static shots edited together to give the idea of moving because they didn't have time to set up moving shots.
They just had to go super fast.
They did like. So if you know nothing about filmmaking, this might mean nothing to you, but they did something between 30 and 40 setups every day.
Which is an insane amount.
Which is just fucking nuts.
What do most people do, like 8 to 10?
Well, let Jim work.
By average?
Jim, how many setups do you do in TV for a day?
Setups? I don't know. Shoot like 9, 10 pages though.
So
40 set. I mean, he probably shot half the film in a day.
I think they shot it in like a week or two.
Yeah, it's
right?
super fast. And you could tell because like after you see and you read that kind of stuff, you remember it's like 90% of the movie is outside to use the natural light.
So the other thing that's interesting about this movie, and again, this is a director who's very deliberate about what he's doing, right? So even though he has no money, and you might think of these as trash movies, they're very like consciously conceived. And so this movie takes place in the desert.
Yeah.
And the whole thing basically is outside, and it's about like a tribe in Africa, right?
It's like about I think it's like his daughter from the first one, and she goes like either back in time or forward in time.
Thing, yeah.
And she lands there, and like her mom is killed, and she's like raised as a child by this African tribe, and she's like this.
And they live in the desert.
Blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman who is actually like a Miss Olympia or bodybuilder. Mm-hmm. So she's just like super like muscular.
Like she is huge.
Yeah, she's really big.
And she's so big that it was in the making of. Albert Pune talks about how it was difficult for her to do some of the fight scenes because her muscles are so giant that she's not super agile.
Well, also because like she just came straight off from the competition, and the big thing for the competition is like you get into the best shape of your life just for that one thing, which means you don't eat a lot, you don't drink a lot. Like your body is just meant to be photographed, and then you need to recover. And she went from that to this, so she's like running low on energy throughout these long shoots
in the desert
and struggling
30
and like overheating.
Yeah.
So it's like this must have been a pretty hard shoot for her.
So the desert and the tribe thing. So Albert Pune talks about how he saw a documentary. Was it a documentary? Do you remember this at all?
No.
He saw like a documentary about some kind of like these tribes people in a desert making some kind of journey, right? Mm-hmm. And he's like, it would be really interesting to use that landscape and that premise as a cyberpunk movie, because the whole thing with cyberpunk is it takes place in cities, in the rain, with lots of neon. And so, I don't think it quite works, because when I think of cyberpunk, when I think of, like, Terminator, Blade Runner, even the first Nemesis, it really is it's tied into the neon, the night,
you need that
the
stuff.
Cities, the rain, the techno, or the synth music.
Like, you can make your own take on certain genres and certain way things play out, but at a certain point, if like you take a cyberpunk movie and you remove all the cyberpunk from it, it's not a cyberpunk movie.
There is a time traveling robot.
There's a robot chasing her, but like when you think cyberpunk, like you think of the set and you think of
it's so specific.
It's so specific.
It's not like sci-fi where it's this huge broad genre.
Like this is definitely sci-fi, but like it didn't have the cyberpunk feel of the first one, which had it in spades. And the first one actually just seemed like just a bigger budgeted, more well put together movie.
Like again, there's like he talks about so many restrictions on this movie, and then to the point where he's like, "Well, I'm going to conceive of this as an experiment," and I think in a way it's very bold to make basically to be like, "I'm going to make a movie of X genre." But make every single aspect of it, except for the fact that we have a robot, the antithesis of that genre.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
So the movie is basically, to give you some idea of the plot, the movie is basically like if you put Predator in the desert, because is it a robot or an alien?
It's like a robot.
It's like an advanced human being that's a murderer.
And you never really see it too much, and
because it cloaks itself
it's probably
like
a budget
Predator,
thing
right?
Again, yeah.
So it comes from the future to kill this woman. So it's sort of Terminator, but it's basically Predator because it's chasing her through this really harsh landscape.
And she can't kill it.
And it's far superior to her.
You kill it and it just kind of comes back.
Yeah.
So it keeps coming back. And she meets these two women who are like
there's
sold
like
for something. And one of them has a plane and they're trying to get away.
Well, because there's like an American treasure hunter or something like that.
It's like a weird subplot that
so there's actually one scene that they spent money on when they fall off that giant. Remember that huge fall?
That was pretty
and there's
cool.
like an explosion. Some of the, I mean,
Cool.
he's if you've seen Nemesis, the original, you know that this guy is very good with action sequences. So some of the fights are pretty cool. But again, it's like everything about this movie is hamstrung by the constraints that were placed on. So it's not like when you know what they were trying to do, and when you look at what the movie is, you're like, yeah, okay, fine, I get it. But it's not like you don't watch it and be like, this is the best movie I've ever seen.
No, but like making a movie's hard enough, but making a movie when producers and everyone is telling you no for everything you want to do.
Well, and also like it's
gotta be freaking impossible.
This
almost.
guy when you have a movie like Nemesis, he probably could have gone up a budget level and directed a script from another person that a producer was sitting on and like moved his way into the studio system. But he was like, no, I want to make my own movies. I don't care if I have no money. I don't care if they have no budget. I don't care if they only come out on VHS and 12 people see them. Like, I want to do what I want to do. And there's something very respectable about that. Yeah.
And plus, he's created his
like 5 or 6 of these now.
Yeah, he created his whole little world. So like, we haven't seen 3 and 4. We will because we have.
And then we'll do
collection.
episodes on those.
So we'll do episodes on those. So we'll see if they get better, if they get different. Because these two, just judging from the poster, these seem a lot more cyberpunky than this one.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
But I mean, it's really interesting to see a movie like you see it. Like imagine if the second Matrix movie took place in a desert and had 2 characters.
Yeah.
Like that'd just be so.
And you cut the budget from like $100 million to like 1.
It's so weird. It's just so weird.
Yeah. But yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're into low budget movies, if you like sci-fi, if you like cyberpunk, like that kind of stuff, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely.
So Nemesis 2, Albert Pune is the director. This is the MVD Rewind Collection set of 2, 3, and 4, and we'll come back in the future and let you know what we think of 3 and 4.